The PSOJ recently launched the latest version of Jamaica's Corporate Governance Code. So what is it and why is it important for your business? I'm Camille Facey and it's time for another episode of Money Moves JA, brought to you in partnership with EXIM Bank's Business Advisory Service, giving you the tools to grow your business. Our guest today is Camille Facey. She's president of the PSOJ's Corporate Governance Committee. Hi Camille, welcome to Money Moves JA.
Thank you for having me.
Corporate governance is not the sexiest thing. It's not something that people really like to talk about much when you talk about business. Well, I guess to you it really is. So you should tell us all about it. What is corporate governance?
Corporate governance involves principles that help to ensure that your business is sustainable in the long term. And that to me is very sexy. And when you are investing money in a business, you want to know that it is going to grow and give you a return. That's what investors want to know. And the community wants to know that, and the nation wants to know that, because the more successful businesses we have, then the better off we are as a nation. So I think that's really sexy.
It actually is when you think about it. It's only if you don't know about it, then you might think it's not sexy. That wasn't me, by the way. Talking on behalf of other people who may think it's not sexy. All right, so the Corporate Governance Code came into effect, well, the most recent version came into effect in March 2022. Tell me what that covers.
So that sets out various principles that if businesses, all types of businesses, follow, will help to ensure that long-term sustainability. So the first code had been focused primarily on the financial sector, then the second code was on listed companies. This latest code now is on all types of organizations, including small businesses and family businesses and even government entities, because governance principles are principles. They're good for all types of organizations. And so this code has merged the principles as relates to all organizations.
Exactly. So that's another misconception. A lot of people had thought that corporate governance, it just sounds very up there, right? Like it's for big companies, not necessarily for SMEs. And you're saying that's not true.
It is definitely not true, because that SME is tomorrow going to be a major company in this country. You just have to look at the Grace Kennedys that grew from small family businesses into now conglomerates. Look at JP, there's so many businesses. And in fact, in the Caribbean, most of our large businesses grew out of family businesses, small family businesses. So anybody listening to this, their family business could be the next major conglomerate.
Awesome. So tell us what you found from your research in Jamaica. Is corporate governance something that is largely lacking?
People who start businesses are very often focused on manufacturing the particular good or delivering the particular service. That's what they know how to do. But in terms of what systems and processes should be put in place to ensure that that business runs well and functions well, sometimes they don't focus as much on that. And especially with our small businesses, what you don't want to happen is to have the business running in a helter-skelter way, because to go back afterwards and put things in place is very difficult. So for example, if you don't have your accounting systems in place and you cannot produce your P&L, your profit and loss, or produce a balance sheet, and then you want to go to the bank is going to ask you for that.
So all of that is part of corporate governance?
All of that is part of governance. It's the financial side of the governance. And then that, because the code allows you to extract the principles that suit your business at this particular stage that it's at. So as you're a small business, then you would want to deal with the things relating to having those financials in place. And later on, you'll get to a point where you have an audit committee that looks at those financials. And if you are a company under the Companies Act, you know that you have to take your financial statements to your shareholders every year. The law obliges you to do that. Of course, if you're the only shareholder, then, you're the only shareholder. But even if you if you have 4 or 5 investors, the law obliges you to produce your financial statements, produce your annual report, and have an annual general meeting. So compliance with legal requirements is part of governance.
Very interesting. And you mentioned something quite important as well, that you can pick different elements of the code, because I'm thinking here, is it a one-size-fits-all type of code? Tell us about the document you have in your lap.
Right. So, yes, I brought it with me because it is a fairly extensive document, but you can use it like a manual. So, for example, there are various principles. There are 7 principles. And the first principle relates to having a board in place. It's management and oversight. So why do you need to have a board? This is your company. When you put that board in place, you're going to have a chairman of the board. And the CEO and the chairman should not be the same. Why is that? You want somebody who can bring independent oversight, who can say to you as the managing director, have you thought about this? Do you know these are the new trends? Do you know that laws were passed related to this? And that's the beauty of a board, because it brings together these different disciplines, because you need to select your board carefully, and this guides you, this sets out principles for selecting the board. You want the board to come with different skills that will augment your skills. And together, you know, the sum of the parts, the whole is greater than the individual parts. So when it all comes together, you get that kind of guidance that can help you grow that business, that will fill the gaps that you may have as a business person. So that's the first thing you need to think about,
that's
putting a board in place.
That's very, because I'm thinking, because I have just elected my board, and we're about to have our first meeting, and now I'm thinking, well, there's going to be a different chairman who can tell me certain things.
Can hold you to account.
It's a bit scary.
It is. Who can say, Kalila, are you sure that's the best thing in the circumstances? Do you realize that this is what is happening in the industry? And it's always good to have somebody who is an industry specialist. Of course, you have the little lawyer, and you may have somebody with accounting skills. And these days, environmental, social, and governance. That's really the latest hot topic.
Right, especially for, say, a manufacturing business.
Yeah, and it's for all businesses. What environmental impact is your business having? What is your carbon footprint? How are you helping to ensure that the next generation has a planet to live on? And your financiers are going to ask you that.
Ooh, okay, all right. So I have looked through the code, and I attended your training recently as well. So we have accounting side, the financial side. You talked about the board of governance, the board as well, which is another important part. What else should I be considering?
Right. So with corporate governance, you need to consider your board is going to be giving you oversight, right? And in terms of how they operate, you want this board to be effective. So they have to be very clear about their role. And their role will normally be to say, what are the objectives of this company? Because when you set up that business, you had a reason that you set it up. You saw something in the market that said that this business will be successful. I can earn money from this business. So what was the purpose of that business? So your board is going to come in now, and it's going to say, what are the business's strategic objectives? And they're going to help you to outline that. Your board also helps you to set the tone at the top. And especially for larger businesses, if things don't flow from the top, sometimes they don't flow. So for example, when we're talking about tone at the top, sexual harassment, the board would make the statement that at this entity, we don't tolerate that. They will approve the sexual harassment prevention policy that will say that if this occurs in our organization, this is who you are to report it to. This is how we will deal with it. We will have a hearing within 24 hours. We will call the parties together. We will investigate. So the board is responsible for setting tone at the top. The board is responsible for, as I said, holding the CEO and the senior management accountable. So if you're not doing your job well, they will say, but you set these objectives and we're way off. You said you're going to produce how many tons of this and we are only half of that? What's the problem? Can we help? Are there issues that we can discuss? The board is responsible for visioning. So all of these things are set out in the code. It also looks at like remuneration, and this is, especially applicable to larger companies, because what we have found is that because we incentivize the senior leadership wrongly, then sometimes we get results that we don't want. And if you go back to cases like the BP case, British Petroleum, when we had that huge oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, when you look at how they were incentivizing their senior management, it wasn't about safety. It was about how many barrels of oil are we producing. So then when whistleblowers and staff came and said, but there are safety concerns, they ignored them. And eventually it ended up costing them billions of dollars, plus huge reputational damage.
Great point.
Yeah, so the BP of yesteryear is totally different to the BP now, because they have now really taken governance on board. They have ensured that there are things like there are whistleblower policies in place, as we're required to do in Jamaica. We have a Protected Disclosures Act that requires each entity to put in place a system. But as I said, depending on the size of the entity, you adopt what is important for you at this stage. And that's what's good about the code. You can read through it and say, okay, at this stage, this will be useful to my business.
Right. So how often should your board meet?
It all depends. Some people meet quarterly. Some people meet every month. And if there's a crisis, some people may meet more than once a month. It just depends. So I would say a new business quarterly, because part of what your board has to do is to be guiding the management. They have to also be looking forward and saying, what if this happened? This may come down the tubes. Have we prepared for this? And they will bring information to the table that one person is just not going to have. Many heads, many minds.
A lot to think about, Camille, and clearly there's much more to corporate governance, so we're going to invite you back for part 2 so we can discuss some more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here's a recap of Camille's key points. All businesses should be guided by the Corporate Governance Code regardless of the company's size. A small family today can turn into a major conglomerate tomorrow. Businesses tend to focus more on the manufacturing of their goods or services and often neglect systems and processes that will help the business run smoothly. Having your financials in order is also a part of corporate governance. If you're a small business, having your financial statements together will play a big role in securing funding. Having a board is necessary for oversight and guidance. They are also responsible for setting the tone at the top. The chairman and the CEO should not be the same person. You want the chairman to bring independent oversight to your board meetings.
That's it for this episode of Money Moves JA, brought to you in partnership with EXIM Bank's Business Advisory Service, giving you the tools to grow your business. Visit their website at eximbankja.com. I'm Camille Facey. Until next time.